Hello, this is Jim. This is November 1st, 2017. Got some tools laid out here. And this is an aggravation board. I've made some various materials. I've made 8 of these now. This is number 8. This is one for my personal use. It's using some hewn pine from Tasmania. Bought on a trip there. And this is walnut. Came from the top of a sideboard that a guy had given to me. I've used it for a lot of different projects, and that's the dark wood here. I've made 8 of these boards, and they're really, it's a lot of laying out, and I've made them all individually on a drill press using a countersink. Countersink was never sharp enough, and it tore the wood. It was kind of hard to clean up. And then the pattern, I just kind of drew it out and used drill press to just drill, and it's pretty hard to do. I saw on YouTube a fellow making aggravation boards using a router. And I happen to have one, happily, and never thought about using it because it takes a template to use this. That's a 14mm round nose bit, and that should be just perfect for the marbles I'm going to use, because they're 14mm marbles, which were hard to get. I had to get them from the UK, and the reason being is in the States you can pick them up anywhere. Here in Australia you can't get them. So anyway, I ordered them from overseas. They're coming in soon. But in order to use a template, you have to use a guide. Guide fits in here, and then the bit just comes up through the center there. But this came with this tool, and this is like a 1-inch guide. No way it would fit for these, because these are 20mm apart. All these holes are, except for these are all 20mm apart. So the template has to have smaller holes. Well, with a 14mm bit there, what's got to happen is that is a piece of conduit that I had from some scrap iron. Metals conduit, 1/2-inch conduit instead, and piece of scrap iron. And from those pieces there, I made myself this nice little template, which the conduit is just perfect, just over 14mm center, and the OD is exactly 19mm, which is the size of that spade bit, and that's what I'll use to drill the holes in the template. That template will allow me to repeat for all 9 boards, just over and over and over again, make a very consistent, nice layout for the board. So I hope that works. Starting to make the template. This worked really well. This little guide, got it mounted in the router to test. Fits in there really nice and snug. It'll be a real good way to make a template and have it fit in there very accurately every time. Yeah, I sharpened the bit because every time I use a bit like this, I seem to hit something steel and it chips it all up. But managed to sharpen it, so it worked really well. So the template. Piece of 7mm plywood, which is just over 1/4 inch. It's not quite flat, but it shouldn't be a problem. These are from a window frame that I'd taken out of the house years back and still got them. Made of Marenti, nice wood. But what I'm going to do is make a template that the internal dimensions of these 4 pieces is going to be the size of my board, which is a little over 14, well, it's 14 inches, which is a little over 330mm. So when these are all set in place, that square there would be 330mm, and I'm using that size because I've got a thicknesser over there that has a capacity of 330mm, and if I want to make a board real flat, I'm going to limit it to that. Well, that's I think a nice square slot for the board to fit into. It's just a little under 330 because I wanted to give myself a 1mm of clearance on the planer. And by adding those bits, I think I've made it nice and flat. That means when I get the holes drilled and the router goes in there, all the holes will be the same depth. This is the aggravation board. It's 89 holes on it to drill. And we're playing this game with 4 marbles in each corner. Some have 5, some have you know, maybe 6 players. So 89 holes, kind of a messy layout, but they're all laid out now. I've drawn a grid on the edges every 20 millimeters, all the 4 sides, and then I just used a straight edge to mark up where the holes are going to lay out. There's the 4 corners at the base, starting point. There's your home where you're supposed to play to, center, then the regular track. Next step is to get the drill press laid out, and we'll drill these holes nice and straight. Well, nearly done. Just drilling pilot holes before I take it to the drill press. There. All the 89 holes are pre-drilled now, pilot holes. That one was off a little bit, so I'm just going to try to correct that on the drill press. All right, wish me luck. Try to correct this one here.
Turn the power on.
Right, well, I made the mistake of I'm going to have to drill both sides, start from both sides so that I can get a clean hole front and back. Okay, the rest should be ready to go. Yeah, well, it ain't pretty. Mainly because that went wrong. Because there's a void in that plywood. Caused it to go all over the place. But I'm going to try to persevere with it. The rest of the holes are intact enough. At one point, because the spacing is so close, I was kind of expecting the center to drop out of it. And it may still do that at some point. So this is take 2. Made it out of MDF instead, because the other one, the gaps here were just too small, and the plywood one, you know, I guess the experts that work with wood all the time probably don't need my help anyway, but plywood just wasn't good because it shattered. There were voids, the grain of the wood, plies were too small, it would chip up, and the actual center ended up falling out because the spacing here was just, plywood wasn't good for it. So this is MDF. The holes are nice and neat, and even with that, the spaces here are still pretty small. And even though there'd probably not be any problem with the center falling out of this, I figured to be safe than sorry. I just drill these, and then if I want to do the other one, well, when I do the other ones, I'll just turn it 90 degrees. I can do the other holes. So there you go. Now I'm just making the other bits of wood. I'm going to use some blue gum, which came from some fence rails that I had. You can see where the let's see, this actually came out of my deck. I had a deck with these are the support beams underneath. And that's where all the nails were holding the deck pieces. So anyways, made it really thick. Some of that will be shaved away when I start planing it down. This is not the full size yet. There's going to be an edge all the way around. Make it nice and neat all the way. So I've got to make 9 of these. Okay, well, the boards are coming together nicely. got lots of character in these. I'd shaved these off quite a bit. These started off as about 25 millimeter, an inch thick, and they're now down to about 3/4. Because when I glue them up anyway, I'm not very good at it. The ends of the boards, these are all small pieces, and I can never get them all to laying up, so I left myself enough gap or enough extra that I could shave it off in the thicknesser. They came out all right. I've done a lot of different pieces of wood. Some of them are all one color. That one had some different colors. This one's variegated all over the place. And then I made these edges, because routing, I never trust the edge into this really brittle wood to I don't think I can route that off really smoothly without burning it or chipping it. So I'll make these edgings. Nice hardwood there. And I'll have these go together, and I'll make the nice edge on all the way around, all 4 sides. Here's some that I've started gluing up already. And the boards themselves are 305 millimeter square, and then the edgings will add another, well, they'll flesh it out to be 330 mil, just shy of it, 325 mil, 330 mil, just whatever fits inside the template that I've made. And then that template will fit nice and snug, and when I cut the holes in it, they'll all be the same. I've already made a couple of boards and learned a few things on using the template over there, and because sometimes there's an opportunity here to, well, not an opportunity, but the pattern turns and you can re-drill that hole, or these holes, because they're duplicated on the pattern. And what happens is the hole will be a little bit elongated, and I did that here. I don't know if you can see it, but the template isn't perfect, plus it's a little bit of slop, so it can move around, and you can see that hole there's a little bit elongated. So you just have to be careful not to do them twice. But other than that, it's looking pretty good. I've got these boards all sized to fit in here really well, and they stay in there. The pattern stays within a millimeter, so it stays centered. This board's kind of interesting because it's got a screw in that one, and I've got another board that's got a bit of a brass screw sticking in one of these holes. That just gives it texture. Let's see what it looks like when I'm actually doing the routing. Board ready to go. Put the template down on top. Get my hearing protection on. So, put the template off, and you can see here the vacuum. I've turned it off now, but it does pretty well. You can see the different kinds of wood here. Some of it doesn't cut, even though this blade, this router tool is brand new. It's still having trouble cutting this really hard wood, or I'm doing it wrong. I'm not sure. I'm still learning. But see, it's kind of blackening. It means it's burning, but it's doing all right other than that. And something else I found out is it's best, these were sticky. The router here didn't want to move in and out very well, and I got this graphite. That graphite helps a lot, and it's smooth. It's nice and smooth now, those two posts. I calculated it out. There's 9 of these boards, and each of these boards has 89 holes. I think I said that somewhere before, but that adds up to around over 800 plunges of this router. And it did it all really consistently with that template. Really, really pleased with that. So what's happening next is I want to put a bit of a beading on the edge. And you can kind of see it there. I think you can see it. I've just set up my router here, router table. So with that big blade, it's just making a nice gentle rounding over on top. Then underneath, I use my table saw here. And when I bring that up, I've got it at a 30-degree angle. And when that goes over the top here, you'll see that it'll be a nice edge. I probably can't see it with the sun like that, but that'll make a nice overhanging edge for your fingers to pick the board up off the table. I saw that on somebody else was making boards like this, and that was a really good idea. It worked really well. Go over it twice in some places because the boards aren't really that flat, but it'll stand up good. Came out really well. Pretty much all the sanding is done. I've already started cleaning these boards up after sanding. Final coat was a 240 grit, or final sanding paper was 240 grit. And yeah, the dust cleaned up really nice. I blew it off. I'm using turpentine and a rag just to wipe off the dust. And I'm on my last one. It's the last one right here. And these, where these have been burnt, kind of a feature, when I was routing out these holes. They're burnt pretty much very consistently. Let's see if I can find a good example. This one here. See, they're burnt there's blackening in there. It's just along the grain, and so some are more, some are less. I'll get some little turpentine on the rag. I've had to change the t-shirt. This is just a piece of t-shirt, more or less lint-free. Lint-free as anything, I suppose. Not wet enough. And I've had to change it because after going through over all these boards, it's not really just the flat wiping. It's all these holes, 800 something holes. I'm gonna get a blister in my finger probably. They come up real nice though, nice and smooth after that nice new router bit. And they're burned so consistently, it's going to look really nice. Just looks like it glows. After I get done with this, I'll start let it dry a bit, and then do the wipe-on polyurethane. A bunch of coats of that. A little bit of sanding in between. I'm just noticing that this is one of the boards that I'd routed twice, this particular hole here, and the marble's going to rattle around in that one because it's oblong. But yeah, it came up all right. Okay, let it go back to the start. Start putting on polyurethane because the other boards are dry. For the finish, I'll be using this Feast Watson. Not a sponsor or anything, but I found it works really well. It wipes on nice and thin. I've done a lot of projects, and this can is still mostly more than half full. So it doesn't take a lot of it, and no real waste with it. Just have to swash it around a bit. And on. Pretty easy as well. I've just noticed something as well on this particular board and some others. You know, it's got holes going all the way through. These holes are going to be painted, and anyways, where the painted ones are, I don't want the paint running through, so I had to fill those. That's why there's a bit of a spot there with some color matched filler. And yeah, so I'll make sure I did that first before I do this on those couple of boards that had holes on the painted ones. These four corners and these lines here, and then these spots here. I'll get paint of some color. Make sure I don't get the flakes. It kind of flakes off. It dries when it dries around the neck. Get that flaking going on. Just a nice clean t-shirt. That's too much. It takes a bit though to wipe it on. See, I got a flake there. It soaks right in. And soaks into the rag as well, so a bit of waste there. I don't want to go into the holes too much, that's why I'm pouring it onto the rag rather than onto the board. Now I have to do the hole wiping thing again. Try to make sure I get the board nice and coated. One thing I've learned from making all these boards is, you know, the wood I'm using is never new. It's been used, it's weather checked, pretty porous in a lot of cases. And that's why I'm not painting this before I put in the first coat of finish. All these spots I'm going to paint, the paint would leach into those holes. Most likely to track in. It looks ugly. So probably everybody else already knew that. It took me a while to learn. But put a coat of finish on it first so the paint doesn't leach all the way through and cause tracking and just get out of where it's not supposed to be. Yeah, I'm going to get a blister on my finger for sure. It's the final one. Something I've learned on the 8 previous boards is that when you watch some instructional videos, they show, you know, they might show it's a big project maybe, and they've got this huge wad of cloth. Well, that's fine, I guess, for a big tabletop or something, but when you have small things like this, you don't need very much t-shirt, and whatever goes in here is wasted. So being a, you know, I have zero budget, so pretty much covers glue if I'm lucky. So yeah, the smaller the piece the better. The other thing was, yeah, why not use a little container instead of spilling it all over like I did over there. This is good. So bit of a dip, get a good coat on it. It starts to fill the holes a bit, which helps. I was starting, did another thing where I started trying to wipe all the holes first and then the top, but had to have doing it again because when I put on a relatively heavy coat like I'm doing, it filled the holes again, so I ended up doing them twice. Just a waste of time. So, and because these boards are also fairly weathered, there's some cracks and flakes and that kind of thing. That you want to have a fairly good coat that it goes underneath all that, goes through it, soaked up. Try to get around the edge so it doesn't drip. Not that this stuff doesn't drip very much at all. And then finally the final wipe of the holes. Comes up really nice. Just the final few holes here, and I'll, this Feast Watson says 6 hours. Probably come back in here. This is right now about noon time. It's time for lunch anyway. So I'll come back in maybe this afternoon and do the backs of these boards. Then I'll be able to do the painting. Paint all the little holes that are going to have to be painted. It's raining outside. As far as climate goes, this building is insulated, but it's not heated or cooled, or doesn't have any fan or moving air or anything, which is good. There's so much dust in here anyways. Not conducive to a nice smooth finish if you have moving air. But outside it's probably 70 degrees, something like that, maybe 60% humidity. Well, with the rain, probably 100%. But pretty good for the good smooth finish. Good weather for that. Not too hot, not too cold. Okay. The 9 boards all have 2 coats, top and bottom. I'd like to put a third on before I do the next step. But it's still tacky after, I've been trying to allow 12-14 hours between coats, but it doesn't. It's still tacky, a bit tacky, and if I tried to sand it, it would just clog up the paper. Right, so I have paint, least fun part. I have 4 different colors, which are white, yellow, blue, and red. And it's going to be, these will be one color, it's another color, third, fourth. That little hole there on each one has the matching with this pile, and then these here rows have to be painted. The least fun part, most time consuming. Each hole that's painted will have 2 coats, and it's just time consuming, no fun. They are all got the spots painted. Of the 9 boards, there's 81 yellows, 81 whites, 89 yellows, 89 whites, 89 reds, 89 blues. My gosh, it's a lot of painting, a lot of detail work. Each of those has 2 coats. I'm just sanding it now, because of course it's not perfect. There were a couple of drops and things where I went outside the lines. When I was a little kid, I could never stay inside the lines. And they look pretty good, but there are some little defects. I'm just sanding them out, putting I'll put on the final coat after this. Just a little brush in there, and painted every one of those with, it's actually quite easy to keep in the lines. And it's only because I had the brush loaded up a little bit too much. I'm going to slop over the edge a bit. And for the most part, I can just kind of make a motion with the finger and wipe the paint off. But sometimes it was already dried enough to fit to the board that it didn't wipe all the way off. So, and there's 4 different kinds of paints here. This is just what I had. There's latex, there's acrylic. I used a lacquer. The red was lacquer. The white was enamel. So I had 4 different kinds of paint. But it's all free. This was stuff I had left over. Came out looking pretty good. Don't look at it too close. To get it sanded, make nice spots, nice clear spots. Really pops. They are done. 9 boards, all lined out on this bed that we had. It's amazing how much room they take. And they're being posed with the nice bags, the covers that my wife made. Quilted them from pretty much offcuts from other projects. And so these are pieced together. It didn't make her all that happy to be piecing. But you can see these have little bags to hold the marbles with them. And these, it's up to the person that I'm selling them to who's going to pick what bag, because one person bought all these 9 boards. And she'll get to choose which board goes with which bag. But obviously we have favorites. My favorites is blue one here. And we both like the one board that has the most color. And that is, I think, this one over here. That one turned out to be the most interesting looking board.
This one's a close second, and then this one's a nice third, the way they lined up all the slats, the light colored pieces lined up. Looking good. Oh, if I must say so myself. This bag was the original one that we'd used for our own personal board, but so she didn't have to rush and make a 9th one. She just used what we already had.